Hey, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I want to take you back 162 years ago today to April 19th, 1861. The Civil War was a week old. The bombardment of Fort Sumter, South Carolina, on April 12th had shocked the nation, sending ripple waves across both sides of the divide, and great fears were expressed in the Union for the safety of Washington, D.C. President Lincoln, newly inaugurated President Lincoln, issued a call for troops to put down the rebellion, and various regiments and companies raced from parts of the Union to the capital. One of those regiments was the 6th Massachusetts Infantry, and the man who was colonel of that regiment is pictured here, Colonel Edward Franc Jones. As he and his men were making their way from Massachusetts to Washington, they got word that they're going to have a little bit of a problem getting through Baltimore. The city was very much Southern sympathetic in its views, and rumors were afloat that there would be the very distinct possibility of an attack against them as they made their way through Baltimore. The city, by the way, what they would do is they would take the train into Baltimore, but because of steam locomotives and the risk of fire to wood buildings, the train would pull up on the outskirts of town. The locomotive and the coal would stay there. They would decouple the passenger trains, take them by horse through town, and then link them up on a new locomotive on the other side of town. So it was that distance as they had to make their way through town in horse-drawn passenger cars that they feared the most. Now, as you know, you students of the Civil War, their fears were realized. There were attacks by mobs of pro-secession sympathizers, and there was a loss of life. Colonel Jones, in his after-action report on April 22nd, 1861, describes a little bit of what happened, and he gives his account of what he told the men going in, including an order that sends chills down my spine every time I read it. So let me share this with you. This is just an excerpt of his longer after action report, but it's going to give you a sense of the excitement and the nervousness and the thrill and the horror of that moment of riding through Baltimore in those passenger trains being drawn by horses. So here's how Colonel Jones explains the situation. Quote, "We proceeded thence to Baltimore, reaching that place at noon on the 19th. After leaving Philadelphia, I received information that our passage through the city of Baltimore would be resisted. I caused ammunition to be distributed and arms loaded, and went personally through the cars and issued the following order, viz. The regiment will march through Baltimore in column of sections, arms at will. You will undoubtedly be insulted, abused, and perhaps assaulted, to which you must pay no attention whatever, but march with your faces square to the front and pay no attention to the mob, even if they throw stones, bricks, or other missiles. But if you are fired upon and any one of you are hit, your officers will order you to fire. Do not fire into any promiscuous crowds, but select any man whom you may see aiming at you and be sure you drop him." That's the part of the order that sends a chill down my spine. Do not fire into promiscuous crowds, but select any man whom you may see aiming at you and be sure you drop him. I'll read the rest of this report, at least this excerpt, to give you a sense of the outcome. Reaching Baltimore, horses were attached the instant that the locomotive was detached, and the cars were driven at a rapid pace across the city. After the cars containing 7 companies had reached the Washington depot, the track behind them was barricaded, and the cars containing the band and the following companies: Company C of Lowell, Captain Follansby; Captain D of Lowell, Captain Hart; Company I of Lawrence, Captain Pickering; and Company C of Stoneham, Captain Dyke, were vacated by the band, and they were proceeded to march in accordance with orders, and had proceeded but a short distance before they were furiously attacked by a shower of missiles which came faster as they advanced. They increased their step to double quick, which seemed to infuriate the mob, as it evidently impressed them with the idea that the soldiers dared not fire or had no ammunition, and pistol shots were numerously fired into the ranks, and one soldier fell dead. The order fire was given, and it was executed. In consequence, several of the mob fell, and the soldiers again advanced hastily. The mayor of Baltimore placed himself at the head of the column beside Captain Follansby, and proceeded with them a short distance, assuring him that he would protect them and begging him not to let the men fire. But the mayor's patience was soon exhausted, and he seized a musket from the hands of one of the men and killed the man therewith. And a policeman, who was in advance of the column, also shot a man with a revolver. They at last reached the cars, which started immediately for Washington. On going through the train, I found that there were about 130 missing. That's one of the most dramatic moments in the march through Baltimore on April 19th, 1861. And Colonel Jones had charge of the 6th Regiment, gave them those orders, and unfortunately, those orders came to be realized, and it added fuel to the Civil War fire that was already beginning to burn out of control. And yet, they made their way through Baltimore, and later that evening, they reached the city, to the gratitude of the population of the capital, including President Abraham Lincoln. So that's it for today's episode of Life on the Research Trail. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care.